She told her daughter they were just visiting. The daughter asked why the man set 2 extra plates. The visit was supposed to last 3 days. Eliza Vane had told her daughter Rosemary that they were going to the country to stay with a friend of a friend, a man named Harlan Ennis, who had a farm outside of Prescott, Arkansas, and who had offered a room because Eliza's cousin Bet had asked him to, and the asking was a favor, and the favor was temporary, and the temporary was important, because Eliza needed Rosemary to understand that this was not permanent. Nothing was permanent. Not the boarding house in Little Rock they had left. Not the job at the laundry that had let Eliza go when the laundry burned. Not the cousin's floor where they had slept for 2 weeks before the cousin's husband had said the floor was needed for other purposes, which was his way of saying that charity has a shelf life, and the shelf life had expired. Rosemary was 7 years old. She had dark hair that Eliza braided every morning into 2 plaits that hung past her shoulders. And she had her father's eyes, the father who had gone to work in the lead mines in southeast Missouri 3 years earlier, and who had not come back, not because the mines had killed him, but because the mines had given him a reason to stay away, and the staying away had become permanent, in the way that permanent things become permanent. Gradually, then completely, then without explanation, so that one day the letters stopped, and the money stopped, and the father became an absence that occupied the exact space a father should have occupied. And the absence was heavy in the way that empty things are heavy, heavier than full things, because full things have weight you can measure, and empty things have weight you can only feel. Harlan Ennis was 44 years old, and he farmed 60 acres of bottom land along a creek that had no name on any map, but that he called Miller Creek after the family who had homesteaded the land before him. He was a tall man, 6'2", with a long face and large hands, and a quietness that was not shyness, but economy. The economy of a man who had learned that most words are unnecessary, and that the necessary ones carry more weight when they are not crowded by the unnecessary ones. He had never been married. He had never been married because the timing had never been right, and because the women who had been available had not been the right women, and because Harlan Ennis was a man who would rather be alone than be with the wrong person, which is a form of optimism that looks like pessimism, but is not. They arrived on a Wednesday in October. Harlan met them at the Prescott Depot with a wagon and a team of mules and a quietness that extended from his person to his animals. The mules were calm, the wagon was clean. The seat had a folded blanket on it for sitting, and the blanket was the first indication that Harlan Ennis had thought about their comfort before they arrived, which is the mark of a host who considers guests to be people rather than obligations. The farm was 3 miles south of town. The house was small, 4 rooms, whitewashed with a porch across the front, and a kitchen garden along the south side, and a chicken coop and a barn, and the particular order of a property, maintained by a person who has no one to maintain it for, except himself, and who maintains it anyway, because the maintenance is a form of self-respect that does not require an audience. The room he gave them was the back bedroom, which had a bed large enough for a woman and a child, and a window that looked out over the creek, and a hook on the back of the door for hanging clothes, and a small table with a basin and a pitcher. And the room was clean, in the way that a room is clean when it has been cleaned by someone who does not usually clean for company. Meticulously, with the anxious thoroughness of a person who is afraid of overlooking something. Rosemary explored. She explored the way children explore new places, with total commitment and no caution, running to the chicken coop and counting the hens, 11, running to the barn and standing on the lowest rail of the stall to look at the mules, 2, named Brick and Slate, running to the creek and crouching at the bank to watch the water move over the stones. And the watching was absorbed and silent, the silence of a child who has been living in rented rooms and borrowed floors, and who has suddenly been given space. And space is the thing that children need, the way plants need light. And the need had been unmet for so long that the meeting of it produced a kind of intoxication, a joy so physical it could only be expressed by running. Harlan watched her from the porch. He watched the running and the counting and the crouching, and he saw what Eliza could not see, because Eliza was too close to see it. He saw a child who was starving for ground, for dirt, for the particular freedom that comes from a place where the edges are fields and creeks, instead of walls and hallways. and the starving was obvious to anyone who looked, and Harlan looked. The first evening, Harlan set the table for 3. He set it with 3 plates and 3 cups, and 3 forks and 3 knives, and the setting was careful and deliberate. Each piece placed with the precision of a man who is accustomed to setting 1 plate, and who is now setting 3, and who wants the 3 to be right, to be evenly spaced, to communicate that the 2 extra plates are not afterthoughts but intentions. Rosemary noticed. Rosemary noticed because children notice everything that adults overlook. And what Rosemary noticed was not the plates, but the spacing. The way Harlan had placed the 3 plates in a triangle instead of a line, so that each plate faced the other 2, so that the table was not a line of people eating in the same direction, but a circle of people eating together. And the together was the thing Rosemary noticed, because together was a thing she had not experienced at a table in 3 years. Not since the father's chair had become empty, and the emptiness had changed the geometry of every meal, from a circle to a line, from together to beside. "Why did you put 3 plates?" Rosemary asked. The question was addressed to Harlan, who was at the stove stirring a pot of beans and ham, and the question surprised him, not because it was unexpected, but because the answer was so obvious to him that he had not considered it might not be obvious to a 7-year-old girl who had spent 3 years eating meals in which the number of plates was never a given, in which plates were borrowed and returned, and sometimes there were 2, and sometimes there was 1, and sometimes there was a plate but no table. "Because there are 3 of us," Harlan said. "But we are just visiting." Harlan looked at Eliza. Eliza looked at the floor. The looking at the floor was the look of a mother who has told her child a necessary lie, just visiting, and who is hearing the lie questioned. And the questioning is coming from a child who is too young to understand the lie, but old enough to sense that the math of 3 plates does not add up to just visiting. Everyone who sits at this table gets a plate. That is the rule of the table. They ate. They ate beans and ham and cornbread, and the cornbread was good. Harlan made it the way his mother had made it, in a cast-iron skillet with enough butter to make the edges crisp and the center soft. And the eating was quiet and warm and domestic in the way that domestic means ordinary. And ordinary was the thing Eliza Vane had not had in 3 years, and the not having had been so constant that she had forgotten what ordinary felt like, and the remembering, triggered by beans and cornbread at a table with 3 plates, was disorienting in the way that good things are disorienting when they arrive after a long absence of good things. Over the next 2 days, the rhythms of the farm absorbed them. Eliza swept the porch without being asked. She weeded the kitchen garden because the weeding needed doing, and doing things that needed doing was the language she spoke, the language of usefulness, the language of earning her space. Harlan did not thank her for the sweeping or the weeding, because thanking would have made the work transactional, and the work was not transactional. The work was domestic, and domestic work does not require thanks. It requires acknowledgement, and the acknowledgement was the way Harlan refilled her coffee without asking, and the way he left a basket of eggs on the kitchen counter each morning before she woke, and the eggs were the acknowledgement, and the acknowledgement was enough. Rosemary followed Harlan. She followed him the way a calf follows a fence line. Not because the fence is going somewhere, but because the following is the point, and the point is proximity. She followed him to the barn and watched him harness the mules. She followed him to the woodpile and sat on a stump while he split oak. She asked questions. How old are the mules? Why is the creek that color? What do chickens eat when they run out of corn? And the questions were endless and specific, and exactly the kind of questions that a child asks when a child has found an adult who answers questions without impatience. And Harlan answered every one. The 3 days passed. On the 3rd day, Eliza told Rosemary they would be leaving in the morning, back to Little Rock, where Eliza would find another laundry job, or a cleaning job, or a cooking job, something that paid enough for a room and food and nothing else. And the nothing else was the landscape of Eliza's future, and the landscape was flat and featureless and stretched in every direction without a landmark. That evening, Rosemary was sitting on the porch with Harlan, while Eliza washed the supper dishes. Harlan was mending a bridle, his large hands working the leather with the same economy he applied to his words, nothing wasted, every motion purposeful. And Rosemary was sitting beside him, watching the way children watch adults who work with their hands, which is with fascination and the particular form of trust that comes from proximity to competence. "We are leaving tomorrow," Rosemary said. "I know. Mama says we are going back to Little Rock." "I know." Rosemary was quiet for a moment. The quiet was the quiet of a child who is assembling a thought from pieces that do not quite fit, the way a child assembles a puzzle without the picture on the box. The pieces are there, but the shape they make is not yet visible. "If we are just visiting," Rosemary said, "why did you set 2 extra plates every night? Visitors get 1 plate. You set 2 extra every night like you were expecting us to stay." Harlan stopped working on the bridle. He looked at Rosemary, at the dark braids in the father's eyes, and the particular seriousness of a 7-year-old who has identified a discrepancy between the story she has been told and the evidence she has observed. And the seriousness was the seriousness of a child who has learned that stories and evidence do not always agree, and who trusts the evidence more than the story, which is the beginning of wisdom and the end of childhood innocence. And both of those things were happening simultaneously in Rosemary, and Harlan could see both of them. "I set 2 extra plates," Harlan said, "because this table has had 1 plate on it for a long time, too long. And when your mother and you arrived, the table looked right for the first time in years, and I did not want the table to go back to looking wrong." "Then why are we leaving?" "Because your mother believes you are visiting, but you do not believe we are visiting. I believe that a table with 3 plates is better than a table with 1 plate, and I believe that a house with a child in it is better than a house without a child in it, and I believe that a person who sets 2 extra plates every night is a person who is hoping, and hoping is not the same as visiting, and I would like your mother to know the difference." Rosemary got up from the porch. She went inside. She went to the kitchen where Eliza was drying the last dish, and she stood in the doorway and she said, with the directness that 7-year-olds possess, and that adults lose, somewhere around the age of 12, "Mama, the man sets 2 extra plates every night because he wants us to stay. He said a table with 3 plates is better than a table with 1. I think he is right." Eliza stood at the kitchen counter with the dish towel in her hands. She stood still, the way a person stands still when a child has said the thing the adult has been feeling but has not permitted herself to say, because saying it would mean acknowledging it, and acknowledging it would mean wanting it, and wanting it would mean risking it, and risk was the thing Eliza Vane had stopped permitting herself, because the last 3 years had taught her that wanting things leads to losing them, and losing them is worse than never wanting them. She had wanted the boarding house in Little Rock. She had lost it. She had wanted the laundry job. She had lost it. She had wanted the cousin's floor, which was the lowest form of wanting a floor, and she had lost that too. The pattern of wanting and losing had become so established that the pattern felt like a law, and the law said, "Do not want," because wanting is the first step toward losing, and losing is the only step after wanting. But Rosemary was standing in the doorway. Rosemary, who had counted the plates. Rosemary, who had noticed the spacing. Rosemary, who had asked the question that adults are too afraid to ask, because adults have learned that questions lead to answers, and answers lead to change, and change leads to risk. Rosemary had not learned those things yet, and the not learning was a gift, and the gift was the truth. Eliza went to the porch. She stood in the doorway, the same doorway her daughter had stood in a moment before, and Harlan was sitting with the bridle in his lap, and the evening coming down around the farm like a curtain being drawn, slow and soft and final. "Rosemary says you set 2 extra plates because you want us to stay. Rosemary is correct. We have nowhere to go. If we stay, it is because we have nowhere to go. And staying, because you have nowhere to go, is not the same as staying." "You are wrong," Harlan said. "You have somewhere to go. You have Little Rock. You have your cousin's floor. You have laundry jobs and cleaning jobs, and rooms that cost everything you earn. You have options. The options are bad, but they exist. If you stay here, it is not because you have nowhere else to go. It is because you have somewhere else to go, and you chose not to go there. And choosing to stay is exactly the same as staying. There is no difference. The choosing is the staying. Eliza sat down on the porch step. She sat beside Harlan, the way Rosemary had sat beside him, and the sitting beside was the answer, and the answer was yes. And the yes was not spoken, but communicated through proximity, through the decision to sit instead of standing, through the lowering of the body onto the porch step beside a man who set 2 extra plates every night because the table looked right with 3. Inside the house, through the window, the table was still set. 3 plates, 3 cups, 3 forks, 3 knives, spaced in a triangle, each facing the other 2. Rosemary's question had been answered. The answer was in the plates.